Hello there, I'm Deborah, and I'm standing here in front of Burke's Cinema in Aberfeldy. It was opened in 1939, just before the start of World War II, a beautiful Art Deco cinema built by Strathmore Pictures with seating for 450. Look at the beautiful facade. The outside has hardly changed since it was built. Perthshire certainly had a lot of choice of cinemas to go to at this time. They popped up from the 1900s in villages such as Alyth, Auchterarder, Blairgowrie, Braco, Crieff, Comrie, Cooperangus, Pitlochry, Perth. All these places had cinemas, and they had great names such as the Regal, the Ritz, the Electric Cinema, the Corona, the Empire Picture House, BB Cinerama, and the Alhambra, to name but a few. I love going to the cinema, and as I take you around Burke's, I wonder if it will remind you of some of the experiences that you've had with cinemas in the past. Let's go in. So I'm in the foyer now. The first thing you have to do is get your ticket. A ticket in the 40s or 50s would have cost about £1 and £6. Was that a lot of money then? I don't know. That's about £2.40 in today's money. Here's a page from the Perthshire Advertiser showing what was on in the Cinerama. This is from 1947, and you can see that Desert Victory was on all week, and the tickets went from 10 old pence to 2 shillings. Then there was the popcorn or the ice cream. You could bring in food and drink, or the usherettes would sell you something. Apparently in some cinemas, a spotlight would shine down on the usherette at the intermission to guide you to where she was standing. So during the 30s and 40s, cinema was the main form of entertainment. The peak figures were in 1946, when it was recorded that the British cinema-going public made 36 million visits to the cinema each week. That makes sense when you see this picture of the queues waiting to get into the cinema in Glasgow. Apparently Glasgow had the largest cinema-going public outside America at that time. By the 1980s, this figure had reduced to 1 million per week. But at the boom time, it was quite common to go twice a week. And I read somewhere that in the 1950s, the average person went to the cinema 36 times a year. So, sitting here in the auditorium at Burke's Cinema, I'm thinking about my first experience of going to the cinema. I think it must have been about 1969 when I went with my parents to see Walt Disney's Fantasia. That was the year it was re-released, in the December, around my birthday, so it was a special occasion. I was little, but you know, I clearly remember looking over the ledge at the front of the balcony, just about able to see over the top, and it was magical. Mickey Mouse as the Sorcerer's Apprentice, there was self-sweeping brooms, hippopotamuses with tutus. It was a fantastic experience. The colours, the music, the animation. My first visit to the cinema, a place of entertainment that I've loved ever since. I've got here a piece of writing from a lady in Perthshire which describes her cinema experience as a child living in Perth. I'd like to read bits to you, and although it's about Perth, I imagine you'll have similar reminiscences no matter which cinema you went to. She says, "There were 4 cinemas in Perth when I was wee. The Playhouse, the Alhambra, the King's, and the BB's. Now let me just tell you that the BB's stood for Bright and Beautiful Picture Company. They owned about 20 cinemas in Glasgow and around Scotland, and they put films on and performances. The BB's was also known as the BB Cinerama." And back to her story. "If your mum was going shopping, you got put into the BB club, and she'd pick you up when she was finished. You got in with a geely jar, but you came out scratching. Now, so from what I've read, the geely jar was a special ticket offer dating back to the 1920s, when in exchange for an empty jar or bottle, children got in with a free ticket, and I assume that the scratching refers to nits." She carries on. "In those days, it was great because you got 4 shows. The main movie, a comedy, the news, and a trailer. I loved the musicals. Doris Day was my favourite." I have to say that Doris Day is a favourite of mine too. I assume she must have seen Calamity Jane, which came out in 1953. This is the poster that advertised it. If it was your birthday, she says, you got in for free and got put up in the gods and everybody sang happy birthday to you and you got a card. I didn't like when they sang happy birthday, it was embarrassing. And although usually loads of people had their birthdays on the same day. The noise we made during the film was terrible, stamping your feet, cheering and shouting like cowboys and Indians. I never liked to stamp my feet or cheer or shout as I was awfully shy. I got embarrassed at the slightest thing. Saturday Cinema Club was a really big thing across the UK. And this is a picture showing one of them. I imagined it would look the same no matter what cinema it was in or no matter where it was. So many unaccompanied children, and they all look as if they're having a really great time. With all the talk of the BBs, I have a few BB's Kids Club photographs to show you. The children, you can see, are wearing paper admiral's hats in the pattern of the Union flag, and some carry bags of souvenir goodies. The paper hats were presented to children at the BB Cinerama in Perth to commemorate the Jubilee celebrations of King George V in 1935. The cinema was just around the corner from where this picture was taken, so I imagine the kids must have just been coming out from the club. It's even interesting to see the advertisements in the hoardings. Can you see the Fry's chocolate? And then there's some brand of cigarettes. The next picture is a lovely one of a child taking part in the BB's Junior Club Talent Competition in 1948. Just look at the microphone and the cinema decor behind her. I wonder if you ever took part in one of these talent competitions, or maybe you were in the audience. Here's another photograph. This is a bit later. It's 1951, and it's one of the children by the Cinerama Christmas tree. It looks so funny to see this now, and to see the toys the children are holding and the ones all by the tree. Seems to be mainly dolls and books, and that Santa is wearing a very strange mask. It seems a strange idea now that a cinema would be involved in giving gifts to children at Christmas in this way. Were you in a cinema club like this where you got Christmas presents? And look at the film star poster on the wall. I don't know who she is. Maybe you do. I do know that the Christmas film this year was Scrooge, A Christmas Carol starring Alistair Sim. And some of the other films in 1951 were The Lavender Hill Mob, Rawhide, Showboat, The Thing, Alice in Wonderland, the Laurel and Hardy comedy Utopia, Bob Hope and the Lemon Drop Kid, An African Queen with Humphrey Bogart, and many more. Did you know that it was in 1951 that the certification of films changed? The U was for all ages. The A was for 12-year-olds with an adult staying in with them. That's the same as it is now. And then a new X certificate replaced one that was called H for horror. Both classifications were for over 16s. I never knew that there was an H. Advertising of films was not what it is now. Yes, there were large posters and billboards, like this one for Up to His Neck with Brian Rix. But here is a brilliant image from 1954 showing how the Alhambra put the word out about this film. Can you see? He's on a cycle and all the kids are running after him, and it looks fantastic. We went to the cinema as teenagers, children, adults. Maybe you were old enough to pay for yourself, or maybe you went on a date and someone paid for you. Here's another reminiscence about being on a cinema date. One time my brother said that he was bringing home one of his pals from the army because he had nowhere to go and he was on leave. He said that his pal was Italian. I remember rushing home to see this Italian, and all I could think of was ice cream, and I about fell up the stairs in my rush. I couldn't believe it when I saw him. He was tall and dark and gorgeous. We went on our first date to the pictures. I don't remember what we saw, but I do remember that I lost an earring, and it wasn't even mine. It was my sister's, and I didn't tell her. It's the same now, taking someone to the pictures on a date. Is that something you did? It has to be the right film though. A romance or a comedy would be my preference. But I suppose if it's a horror or an action film, that would be a good reason to move closer together. With family or friends, older or young, going to the pictures is a lovely shared experience. There's nothing like hearing the whole auditorium laugh and gasp at the same time. And where else is there you can sit and eat a ridiculous amount of popcorn? usually by the time the film has begun. I'll leave you with one more photograph. This picture is of the Playhouse in Mill Street in Perth. It was opened in 1933, was a flagship for the Caledonia Associated Cinemas. The Grand Cinema had seating for 1,687, a cafe and 2 shops. This image is from 1952, and as you can see, the film was Ivanhoe, starring Elizabeth Taylor. We're lucky that in Perthshire we still have 2 cinemas from the 30s that are still functioning as cinemas today. This Burke Cinema and the Playhouse in Perth, 2 places that will have created many memories. So a few years back, my children, my husband and I, we went to see a cinema re-release of The Sound of Music, and it even had an intermission. And although we'd seen it many times before, it really felt like I was watching it for the first time with my family around me to share the experience. Another new cinema memory was made. It makes me smile when I think about it, and you'll have memories to smile about when you think about your past visits to the cinema. I hope that being here at Burke Cinema, looking at some of the photographs or posters, or hearing the reminiscence of others will have reminded you about the cinema experiences you have had in the past. The children's clubs, the people you went to the cinema with, and the films you saw and how they made you feel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.